this lovely December evening. I would like to start off with just a little reminder that Wednesday night at the high school cafeteria from 6 to 8, we'll be reviewing the final master plan. So for any of those that are interested in coming to see it, and I should say it's the final draft, because what we're asking people to do is take a look at it. If there's any additional feedback or comments, we would be happy to take those, incorporate it into the final plan, and then bring that forward in January to the planning board to vote. So it's been a culmination of 3 years of work. We're keeping our fingers crossed that everybody understands it makes sense. We still have some, easier reading documents to do, but I think it'll be a good starting point anyway as our foundation. So that's that. Okay, we're going to start off tonight's session with the liquor license renewals. And I have a list here for the 2019 liquor license renewals, and I'm just going to name them off, open up for any comments from the board, and then we'll vote them as a slate if that works, okay? So the first one is Manchester Fitness, Alley's Beach Street Cafe. There is the blank name right now, but formerly the Landing at 7th Central. Foreign Affairs, Manchester Yacht Club, Crosby Market, the Lawrence R. Chase Corp., which is part of Harrigan's Manchester Package, Seabreeze Variety and Richdale Convenience Stores, Neighborly Restaurant Group, also known as Callis, Admiral Bailey Post, which is the American Legion, Essex County Club, the Singing Beach Club, and OPP LLC, which is Supervine, and the YGG, also known as Bravo by the Sea. So those are our annual liquor license renewals. Do we have any comments, questions?
I guess I just wonder, why do we approve a TBA?
Won't they be coming?
They will, you're not approving it.
Right.
Oh, okay, it's on the list, that's where I was, okay.
Yeah,
So
we're
they'll-
approving the landing, or the 7th.
No, they're not renewing,
Because he's not renewing.
so you'll be seeing a new application.
So then this one is not in here at all.
Number 4 is
So
not.
4 should be.
You can scratch that
Okay.
one off, basically.
All right, so all others.
That's just a placeholder
Okay,
to let you know what was happening.
okay.
If I remember correctly, that there's actually one unused.
What?
Don't we have capacity for
Two,
one
I
more?
think.
What's that?
I think we have two.
I have to double check, I don't
I
know
remember,
that offhand.
I remember from last year, there's at least one,
think
there
it's
may
one.
be two.
Yeah.
Yes. We'll double check.
And I assume all the required documentation is in place and ready for this?
Yep, Sonia's been
Good.
checking that off.
So with the exception, it will pull out number 4, which is the TVA landing, formerly known as the landing. Other than that, are there any other comments or questions? No? I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2019 liquor license renewals.
Second. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We have a few updates, and this is going to be something that we're going to try to keep on our agenda going forward as a consistent agenda item, just talking about specific updates of things that we've talked about in the past. So tonight, shared services, the 375th Anniversary Committee, and the Senior Center efforts. So, Greg, maybe you want to fill in on give us a little background. We had our meeting last week with the Essex Board of Selectmen and agreed that we would pursue some consulting dollars through the state or a grant through the state to pay for a consultant, and there's been some updates with that.
Right, so it turns out that the grant that was discussed at your last meeting, that particular effort does not have funding at the moment. But the good news is that Essex can pursue a community compact grant. We need to wait a year before we're eligible again, because we've already done 2 rounds of that. Essex has done 1 round, so they're eligible for that second round. So the state was very encouraging to receive an application from Essex, which we would be a partner with, for funding. So the good news is that money would become available very soon. So we should, with any luck, have the funding in place by the first of the year, and can proceed sooner than it would have been under the original grant. So despite what appeared to be disappointing news at first, it turns out that the substitute is actually a little better for us in terms of being able to move quicker on this. So Brendan and I are working on that application. He has most of it together and talking about different, reaching out to different consultants that might be appropriate for us to talk to help us out.
And I think we have something scheduled for January with the Essex?
January 7th?
January 7th,
Is your next meeting. It's your regular meeting.
right. And
So we'll do an abbreviated meeting here and then head over there.
And I would say for the agenda for that meeting, I would love to start talking about the topics of the study, understanding who the consultants are that we're asking for. And we began the process of prioritizing and looking at what are the points that we want to look at. So that would be a good agenda item for the 7th, is to review the consultant list and look at the topics that we want to go and put in that scope.
Yes, that makes sense.
What are the proposed dates?
January 7th. It's a regular meeting we have. It doesn't, we'll miss you, we'll
Yeah.
miss you. Okay, this 375th Anniversary Committee. So there were some wonderful people who stepped forward and interested in pursuing this committee post to look at our 375th celebration. What I wanted to just get a sense from the board was two things. One is I'd like to make a last call and make this point out and again put that forward that we have positions open for people that may be interested. We'll make sure we put that forward in the communication across the social media and the Cricket. And that over the course of the holidays, we get whatever else, anyone else that would want to come in. I'd like to appoint this committee probably sometime in January to get started. And we should think about what kind of a charge or any questions we want to put forward to them. So, does that make sense for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other comments or thoughts? Okay. Great. Oh, good. Oh, fabulous, that's wonderful, okay. So we've got some good, we've got great people on board, so I think it'll be a really fun thing. So, just as the last call, we'll let people go, and we'll make sure that, we'll close that out in January.
So 7 months before Tom Tito got on another committee.
Yeah.
Is that what it was, 7? Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. He showed a lot of restraint. That's perfect. Okay, great. Okay, so that's that. Let's see. The senior center efforts. We made a commitment back in October, I think, was to go forward for a study and to look at the feasibility for senior center work. And we have some updates on that. And Greg, I think that there was a grant, there's a few things that are going on, so maybe you could just...
So, sort of two fronts. One is to be working with DPW to help identify a consultant who could do a very sort of high-level feasibility analysis of the different sites that have been identified for town property that we might consider. So that we'll be getting some quotes on that to see if that's an effort that we can undertake now or wait until the new fiscal year. I'm optimistic that we should be able to undertake that sooner rather than later. The other piece is that there continues to be other possibilities that come up, so different buildings in town. So we've been approached by one landowner in particular who might be interested in leasing some space. And so those kind of discussions will be ongoing. So we'll certainly update you as those evolve and materialize. We have more details. But at this point, we haven't had those discussions yet, so as soon as we do, we'll be able to provide you with some more information. So as this unfolds, we uncover potential for new possibilities, and we'll be exploring those as they come along. There'll be that in addition to the 4 or 5 sites that were initially flagged by the committee.
is there somebody on staff that's sort of leading the effort on this? Is Nancy involved, or how?
Right, so Nancy will be our lead on this, and we'll certainly be coming back before you with some updates.
I would love to see sort of an approach process, sort of, this is where we are, here are the things we're considering, something documented for us so that we can follow through and track with timeframes and, again, making sure that we're on task with doing what we say that we're going to pursue here, seeing that we made that commitment in October. So perhaps for our January 7th meeting, or I don't know if we'll have it in time for December, but I would love to see that on the
Yep.
agenda in terms of a process. That makes sense?
Mhm.
Any other thoughts? All right, so our next item on the agenda is the town administrator's evaluation, which has actually already been done, but what we're talking about here are the goals and the goal document of bringing those forward. And one of the lessons we learned last year that when you have, what do we have, 18 goals?
17, yeah.
17,
Yeah.
18 goals. That even if they're small and discrete, it's way too many. So one of the things that I'm asking folks to think about, and what I want to do tonight, is have a little bit of a discussion, take this forward, and then bring forward the final goal set in our meeting on December 17th. But we talked about a bunch of topics that we wanted to pursue. Greg put together a list. Arthur's been working on sort of consolidating some of this into a document that we can work from. But I want to kind of get a sense from the board on what you think the priorities are. So I would love to get to maybe 5 or 6 goals with really clear priorities and things that, certainly, Greg, you feel like is a realistic timeframe, how we're going to update them, what we're going to do with that. So there have been a number of things that we've listed, top down, from, looking at the fire strategy, what we're doing with that, strategy around HR, strategies around IT, issues with looking at our financial principles, understanding how the master plan implementation can move forward, and looking at overall shared services. So those were some of the top-of-mind ones that we've addressed already. And I just really want to open this up to folks and see kind of what your thoughts are and what you think and where things are headed. Do you have a copy of what Greg sent?
So I'll start. I mean, I think,
Okay.
Greg, I looked at what you sent over, and it all made sense. I think the one thing we need to be careful of, and I see this in my day job, as well as the examples like this as well, is I think we need to be able to separate what is inherently an expectation that is fundamental to your job versus a goal that we aren't doing today that we need to go and achieve in the coming 12 months. So I think a couple of these I would probably characterize more as just things that we would expect in general. Specifically, I think creating a strong leadership team of key department heads. I think that's already part of your charter and kind of a certain expectation. Well, I agree with you. So I'm not sure that's really a goal. And then I think also from a management standpoint, the identifying department-specific goals that relate to the master plan, I think we do need to account for the master plan, but I think I would kind of view that as something that you would just do as part of your management for next year. So I don't know if that's, in my mind, quite a goal per se. I think it would be kind of something that we would expect happening anyways. I think I do agree with you on your first 3, which are specific to the fire department leadership and fire department strategy. And then the budget development cycle in terms of working with, that's a little bit of kind of the existing role as well, but I think in there that we may call out more is a little bit more of a budget process and even kind of the tenets that we were talking about, or a defined financial charter that we use and that we can reference, and that I think anybody in the town, if they wanted to really understand the principles that guide the finances of the town, that we document that. We don't. I mean, we sort of do, but I don't think we formally document the way we should in the examples that I sent from other towns. So I think that was something that we might want to call out specific in number 2. And then I agree with you in terms of, basically I think of just an HR strategy and an IT strategy for the town. So I would agree with 1, 2, and 3, 2 being slightly amended to call out more of a defined financial plan for the town. 4 and 5, I think, I just view them as things that I would expect. I'm just not sure they're actually goals. So I'll let others go. I've done some integrating of this, plus things that I think we referenced in the past year, plus other things I think we've talked about more recently as a board, so I can follow up once people have time.
I am in complete agreement with Arthur's, the top three. And I also feel 4 and 5 are enabling the daily process and operations of town hall. So, do we just stick with 3 or start to problem solve some more, right?
I really like the idea of having that sort of accessibility and transparency. And I think that's pretty essential. It's not that it's not there now. I think that some people do feel that perhaps it's either not as accessible or as approachable as they might like it to be. Is that, you know what I mean by that?
So are you talking about the goal in terms of having him be office hours? We're trying to, so specifically making it easier and more approachable.
Yes. In addition to with what Arthur said about the defined financial charter. Yeah.
Elon, do you have any thoughts?
I think I articulated these already, but primarily, most of it's pretty much the same. I think the fire department is, strategy is pretty much top of this. I think shared services is high up there, and getting a stronger facility plan.
So, the only other thing I would add to this listing, so we talk about fire, the budget, the strategies on HRIT, shared services. Where I'm most interested in, and this comes into, we're at the turning point now, or point of inflection for the master plan turning into a piece. I'm interested in the strategy from the town perspective of implementation. So thinking about Sue Brown and her role relative to town planner, your role, and department heads and how all that works together. But I think really coming up again with a strategy and a plan, implementation plan that takes what we've written but puts it into a usable and measurable part of everyone's goals as we go forward. So I think that whether it's facility planning, looking at the LCD, reviewing all the zoning bylaws, those are some of the top ones, looking at the housing options. Those are all things that have been identified as top of mind for this coming couple of years. But how will those actually get implemented and pushed through? So I think that's the only thing. So I think we're pretty much in agreement on what the top 5 or 6 are. So does that make sense to you, Greg? Any thoughts?
So what strikes me as probably one of the more amorphous ones, or less defined, is this issue of communications and transparency, et cetera. So it'd be helpful if there were more specifics that you would see as what you would recommend that we actually do.
And that's hard, because I think that it's more a perception, but that might not necessarily be the case than it actually is. So I'm not sure how to change the perception.
Well, I think part of it is there's a lot of work underway, like what Christina's doing with all of the communication pieces. I think the biggest gap for us around perception and transparency is there's a lot of things that happen that aren't necessarily public or clear because it's just activity you do on a daily basis and how that goes. So I think the advent of having our new reporting structure, or rather, the ability to share information through our blog, giving the departmental updates, keeping that communication flow moving
And the
forward.
newsletter.
And the
Because
newsletter.
There's, I think, for a specific demographic, it doesn't rely as heavily on,
So with the newsletter, the communication strategy, office hours, I think those are sort of the things that we're talking about.
yeah, it's not anything that's a personal reflection on any of that.
No, I understand, I just,
I mean, not, and
It's-
I don't mean just you, I mean, it's same with the perception of the Board of Selectmen. I've heard from some people, so.
Anything else on that? So those are our, we've agreed that those are sort of the priority pieces, and we'll finalize the documents and move on.
okay.
Okay.
Just one more thing is I think that there's two things. One, I do want to put it out there that I think even with a shrunken list, it's still a lot. So I'm toggling between, Greg, your performance goals and what the needs of the town are. And I guess in a way you're responsible for both, but the achievement of, the full achievement, the true achievement of the town goals, or the town needs, I'm concerned that it's going to require more than you. So I'm happy that you get measured on these things, but you single-handedly aren't going to solve fire. You single-handedly aren't going to solve budget. So I think we need to be very realistic, and I think on top of getting the right resources in place, which, again, to get back to something that I'm concerned about, it gets back to the capacity of your office, i.e. you, and whether some of these things that we're aspirationally trying to do are realistically achievable. They're needed, I don't dispute that, but are they realistically achievable with the way we're set up? And to truly close on a fire strategy and staffing plan. Again, we're not going to solve it tonight, but glad these are your goals. These are an HR strategy. These are not things that you just tick off in a couple of hours extra at the office. These are, for the sake of the town benefiting for years to come, these are things that have to be very well thought through, and so you need to be careful about what is realistically a way to measure you versus what the town is trying to do. So that's one. The second thing is, I think there are a couple of things that were on some of the discussions in recent months. I think they were even part of your goals last year. I don't know whether they were fully achieved or not, but they still linger. I don't know whether they really will make it into a defined goal because they're not on the list of things that people were just batting about. But I think there's still things that we need to put a flag on if it's not going to be part of your goals, and I think the town needs to figure them out. Like one, the work on the LCD, and I think in general, the economic development plan for the town. One of the things I'd like to see is what is happening to small business in town. My impression is that it's not great, and that's a concern if we're so concerned about our tax base or the overdependence on residential real estate taxes. So I don't think it's just the LCD. I think there's some attention that we need to pay to downtown in general and what's happening in small business. And then secondly, we've paid a lot of money. I think we're probably going to see it in your budget, but I think it would be unfortunate if the town didn't mobilize more in the coming year on the climate change risk. Not saying we need to go build all sorts of things, but I'm just thinking like a year without us contributing to the cause in some fashion is, I think, going to be very unfortunate. So again, I don't think it's going to qualify as one of your goals, but I hope in the year that we do something, whether it's a committee that's formed I don't know, but, you know, repairing the chowder house and fixing the Singing Beach wall, those are all reactionary things, and I think we need to be more proactive with them. So I know that Sue Brown, and there's a lot going on with Concom, but I think the town above that needs to be doing something.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We really need to be, if there's any way to try to get in front of it, and I don't know if there are federal organizations that can sort of lend a hand in that department.
Not so much federal right now. Certainly the state is putting more resources into resiliency planning. We've been on the ground floor of those,
Right.
and we'll continue to pursue those. I think there's been some, again, sort of quiet work going on that probably needs to be brought more to the fore so the public is more aware of them. And as we look at the budget, ways that we start putting money aside for what will be some expensive and pretty major decisions to make. You know, do we fortify? Do we retreat? What does that look like?
Right, but those are discussions, as Arthur said, that we really, I know that we have, and that's also in part of the master plan, but maybe a bit of a.
Maybe that's where, that gets back to what Susan you were talking about in terms of putting a master plan in action, and maybe that's where we pick up the economic development and environmental risk. Make that a focus for putting the master plan in.
No, I think it does.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the top goals or recommendations from the master plan, it has to do with the LCD, economic development, housing. And then as it goes down, there's certainly, you know, it covers all of these topics. So I think the implementation goal of that, however that's organized, whether it's another committee or handled internally or whatever, that's the recommendation I'm looking for from the town perspective, is to say what's our best, because we have a lot of things cited in terms of grants that are going to be requested and money that's coming forward for studies and all kinds of things, but we need an organizing structure to make sure that these things are stitched together. Yeah.
Anything public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Anybody else from the board first? Yep, you need to take a mic.
'28 Pine Street. The only reason I'm here tonight is to learn more about the shared services portion. Now, this is the first I've heard that it's actually a goal for the town. So I guess I have to ask, first of all, who established that goal? Is it you, Greg, or is it the BOS?
So, last year at town meeting, the Board of Selectmen put up a non-binding referendum and asked the town if they would be willing to support us as a board looking into shared services and regionalization.
Okay, so
the
that's,
town meeting voted yes.
okay.
And we have started some initial conversations. It is as far as we're interested in talking with folks. We're looking at opportunities where it might make sense. It will be a very open and inclusive process. We're trying to make sure that the department heads, the townsfolk, everybody's going to be part of this going
Okay,
forward.
that's great.
Right now, what we're doing is we're trying to get some money from the state so we can fund an independent study
Correct,
to look
right.
at this. So it's not just an idea of a group of people or whatever. It's actually something that will be looked at because the state is really supporting the concept of shared services.
Yeah, is there a definition of what the scope is for shared services? Is it fire, sharing fire, services? Is there
That's what-
some general definition that people like me can look at?
That's what we're asked for January 7th. So we're
Okay,
beginning the
that's-
process.
okay.
It's all just starting off right now, so.
All right, great.
yeah. But there's plenty of information on the state website around regionalization, shared services. There's all kinds of information there. but we're taking that as a point to,
Yeah, it seems to me, just one last remark, that there's a lot of elements to that, including, how the proration of, I have no idea what we're talking about quite yet, but I am very interested in that as a taxpayer here, mainly because, as we prorate services, shared services for our schools, I'm going to be extremely interested in how much money, as a taxpayer, we're going to be putting forward, for Essex. And also, as I said in an email earlier, which I hope is incorporated, that was last week, I want to make sure that we understand that, we're going to be able to access our services here quickly and not have to go to Essex. Now, that seems like pie in the sky, and maybe is, but in the meantime, at least it's out there ahead of time, because I really don't know what we're talking about quite yet. But I am going to learn about it, and what would be helpful, after listening to all the discussion, is if either Greg or yourselves put into the blog some general idea of what the state considers the scope of shared services. I did look it up, and most places, like Beverly, Salem, they share the water services. And that's pretty much standard. But other services, I'm not quite, other than the school system, not quite sure what we're talking about quite yet. So that's all I have to say, but I appreciate the time. At least you have my input ahead of time, so for what it's worth. Thank you.
Gail, that'd be great.
okay. Any other comments on evaluation, goal setting? All right, before we'll go into our consent agenda, correspondence, town administrator report, I'll reopen up for any further public comment at that point, and then we'll get into our budget discussions around 7:30. So consent agenda were the Board of Selectmen minutes from November 19th, the 2019 calendar of holidays, that's a nice way to put it. The Adele Irving gift to the library, the Winthrop Field Gate, and the Massachusetts Housing Partnership Grant. Anybody have any questions or concepts or?
On the minutes, page 8, there was a last sentence, and it stated, Mr. Bowling indicted, and I think it's supposed to be indicated. Indicted. So I just think it's supposed to be
Indicted? Okay.
indicated. Unless I missed
No,
the
I think
thread
you're
of
right.
that.
I think you're right.
So, page 8. Oh, maybe let me just double check on here.
Well, so it's, the page
Okay.
numbers.
Oh, you know what?
are-
I'm
Oh,
looking
the
at
pages
page.
are off 'cause you're looking.
Okay, sorry, I'm looking on page 2. Wait, no, where'd it go? No, I
No,
had
it is, it's at the bottom of page 2. Just
Yes.
go in and-
Yeah, it's at,
Oh, here it says indicted.
yeah, this one says it
There you go. Good.
All right, so that's that on the minutes. Any other comments? No, just
Yeah. Pretty special that Adele
Keeps on giving.
keeps on giving.
Absolutely.
Yes, she was
Very
very,
generous.
very generous
Yep.
gift for the library going forward. And
I did have a question about the Winthrop Field Gate. And And the question was, I got that there have been some issues with ruts from the tractors going into the equipment going in. And I guess there might be other traffic in
I think that's what's,
that's the
that's
biggest
their
thing.
motivation,
Right.
is to try to keep other
That's what I was
trucks off.
Yeah, okay. All right, that was more my question, because who sets up the use with the tractor that goes in and plows? I mean, gets the
mows it
Haze it,
down,
yeah,
haze it, yeah.
yeah.
So the committee
The
does that.
winter field
Okay,
committee.
and that's not being jeopardized there,
No,
that's, it's
no.
just the, okay, all right, thank you, that's it.
Okay, any other comments? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Correspondence, letter from Governor Polito congratulating us on completing best practices in community compact. A letter from Xfinity for TV channel updates and their price changes.
Those were riveting.
Yeah,
Riveting.
yeah, it's exciting reading Xfinity letters.
They always are.
A little dry. But anyway, okay, town administrators report?
Okay, so we should have for you at your next meeting the review of the Charter House project. We hope to, that should be wrapping up in the next week or so. And so we'll have that available. And DPW will be into with the consultant to review those findings
So that'll be on December 17th?
on the 17th. Okay? That's the plan. They're assuming that we'll meet that deadline. Excuse me. So generally, construction work is winding down. The drainage work on School Street will be finishing up in the next week or so, 2 weeks. Should finish up most of the digging this week and then clean up next week. So that has gone fairly smoothly, as well as the water line on Ocean Street. No need for change orders on both those projects, and coming on budget and on time, so that's a
School
good
Street?
thing. Pardon?
School Street?
School Street and Ocean
Are they-
Street.
What's gonna happen with the curb on School? Is it gonna be an asphalt curb, or are they going back to the original granite? It does look-
Chuck and Nate are actually in the back room, so I'm going to turn to them.
Can you just, sorry,
You
can you
need to
just
grab
grab
the
that
mic,
so we
Nate.
can, sorry, we just want to make sure everybody can hear. Thank you.
Nate DeRozier, Project and Facilities Manager for DPW. We are keeping the existing curbing, so when we removed it, we stockpiled it on site, and they're going to be coming back in to reset it. We'll be adding a couple extra pieces here and there for bad pieces that we found, but generally be the same curb.
Because the Friend Street, on the east side of School at the Friend Street intersection, looks like they put a temporary asphalt strip in.
Yep, for the handicap ramp. So
Looks like the
those,
curb,
those
too.
are going to be, this meeting, I'm not sure what you're talking.
Yeah, anyway, if the original curb's going back, that's great.
Yep,
That's
yep,
good.
all original.
In addition, we will be doing valve and hydrant work through the month of December, possibly into January. And also the Morse Pier work, well, that'll start up in January. That'll be probably maybe a 6-week project or so. We're redoing the seawall there. We're hopeful that we can extend it back towards Beach Street a bit, do a little bit more of that wall as dollars allow. And the bids for the Reed Park float expansion, those are out. We'll be getting those back next week, this week, okay, the end of this week. And lastly, the street lights installations, those will be beginning in another week or so. And people will be seeing those going up. So that's where construction is. You have Nate and Chuck in the back of the room. If you have other questions, they can answer more details. Moving on, we are working on the board and committee trainings. Both Susan and Alan O'Brien have been working on the general trainings for boards and committees. We're targeting July 10th and 12th.
January.
I'm sorry,
A lot of
January. January 10th and 12th. And those will be repeat sessions. They'll be the same, just offered twice. In addition, there'll be a focus training session for the ZBA and the planning board, really focusing on their sort of quasi-judicial role in particular at the end of January 28th.
So the HTC is also quasi-judicial, right?
Yes, they are,
So maybe they should be in that one as well.
yes. Yeah.
And isn't there, there's something that, isn't there something else? But it,
Tom?
yeah, I think there's something else that night, but I was, wondering if that wouldn't behoove, some of us to be in attendance with that as well, just to have a clear understanding of what their processes are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the more the better.
Yeah.
Take advantage of the trainings that we'll have. So the the 10th and 12th trainings will be primarily led by staff from the Inspector General's office, and then Susan and Alida will be helping with that as well.
Are these daytime or evening, do you know, Susan?
So the 10th will be the evening, it's a Thursday evening, and then the 12th is a Saturday morning.
That's good.
And the agenda for those are, it's a combination of how to run effective meetings, but it also talks about ethics, it talks about, general rules of engagement and the stuff that we all need to know as we be members of boards. And we'll have a draft of that probably within the next couple of weeks, so we can share the agenda maybe at our next meeting. So, okay, great.
So moving on, so the construction of the new elementary school, that'll obviously be a large project. And will have a lot of different impacts. So as they get ready to put their project out to bid, they are trying to identify areas where the contractor can have a staging area, lay down, store materials, lay out materials, parking for all the construction workers. There could be, as many as 80 construction workers around. So it'll be a large construction project. So they have been looking around, trying to identify possibilities. So a few possibilities that I just wanted to highlight for you. One is using the old skate park asphalt area as a parking area primarily. And that's fairly benign in terms of impact. Park and Rec is hoping to create a pickleball court there going forward and find a new home for some skate and dirt bike type, pedal bike operations. We're working with some kids on relocating some of those activities, and they have some good options. So anyways, that's one possibility, is having them use that, so that would delay the pickleball court a couple of years, but relatively low impact in terms of current operations. The other two areas they are very interested in, is one or the other. One is looking at the two tennis courts near Coach Field parking. So they would take that over for the duration of the project. And then at the end, they would tear up the asphalt, put down new asphalt and new coating on that. So that's one possibility. They would also be interested, if we thought it was feasible at any shape or form, is to use about a third of the turf field at Coach Field. So the advantage of that is that they would then contribute towards the complete renovation of that turf field. Huge disadvantages that we obviously lose the use of that field, at least for regulation games, for 2 years.
Also, it would essentially require that it be renovated at the end of that time frame, right?
Right.
So the addition, whatever cost would be, it would be incumbent on the school and the town at that point to fund the remainder of that.
Correct. Yes.
This is not small.
And a financial impact to the Parks and Rec program, not being able to rent that field.
Correct. Yeah.
And because of
And-
proximity to water, with that and this current skate park, don't we have concerns about how they would?
In terms of flooding that might
Well,
occur.
flooding as well as materials, anything that might.
Well, so
leach
they would,
out
Concom has to approve all of this.
Right.
So they need to go through that process and put appropriate safeguards in place. for that.
Not having that field available to town programs at
Mhm.
minimum is a major impact.
Right.
What about that, what about the Upper Pine Street area? Is that possible to use that as?
So that could be
They do.
potentially sort of an off-site parking, and they would
Yeah.
shuttle people
Yeah.
back.
mean,
Probably
that's-
not too attractive to them in terms of material storage.
I'm sure not, but.
The,
What's the time frame, 2 years?
Yeah.
the skateboard park for, satellite parking, 127 is a state road. What's the ability to get a cut in that?
I think a temporary one is probably something we have to ask, but I
Because
think.
that's
it-
the only option.
Right.
Right.
Yes, no, you'd require a curb cut.
Is the
Tough
parking
stretch.
area and the small field behind Sweeney Park unrealistic?
I think Sweeney Park's in bad enough shape as it is.
Well, I was
It's that-
thinking actually we might get a rejuvenated park out of the,
Yeah, it also would take that space away from the
Okay.
programs.
no, I mean behind the small field behind the baseball field.
That's a field, that's soccer,
Yeah.
that's Little League, that's, and
Well, I
it's
know it's used,
underwater,
but I'm
and it's
trying to-
underwater when it rains.
Mhm.
But exactly my point, like that is a used space, but we're gonna lose a used space somewhere.
Unless
And it
it's on
impacts
I'd
fire.
much
town
rather keep
programs.
the turf field as is, because I think to me, that's a non-starter from the revenue and the usage of that area, and so we're gonna lose a space.
Well, that's what I was thinking of Upper Pine
What do you
Street.
gain by losing a space if we could
It
redevelop?
just pushes who loses the
Yeah.
space to another spot. What programs lose their space.
But I'm not arguing to lose,
No, I know,
but I'm
I know.
trying to come out the other side with something
Right.
improved.
The park is used considerably in the spring and summer.
So I think a recommendation from Cheryl from the perspective of Parks and Rec and program impact on these sites, as well as.
Right, no,
what
she's
the school
involved,
and she's
yeah.
doing that.
And
The
the
other thing I
Sacred
would
Heart
say-
is a great idea. The
Yeah.
parking, if they'll let people park there during the week. I mean, that's a great,
Well, if you're storing materials, though, it's, yeah.
no
it's fine.
materials, but just for parking.
I
That
think-
neighborhood's gonna be.
Well, this is my issue is I would vote whatever way we could to minimize the impact on the residential neighborhood. If you put it at the tennis courts, or if you put it at, the field, Coach Ed Field, even though there's construction going on there, it just adds more to that general area. So I vote for either like an Upper Pine Street or something that's a little bit off the grid a bit, that doesn't minimizes the impact of program and revenue, but, so, that's the opinion I have. Any other thoughts? All right, Greg, what else do you have here?
All right, so moving on, waste management, our contractor for trash pickup, recycling, as well as what would be the bulky items as well. So a lot of changes and turmoil in the market right now. Recycling market has all but collapsed. So it is a cost center rather than a money-making area. Used to bring in revenue to us and now costs us it's an increasingly higher cost. Waste Management was pushing hard to open up the contract. We pushed back on that and say, no, we've got a contract. You signed it. And particularly if we don't see an improvement in your service, we have no interest in opening up the contract. The original contract did call for them taking over and handling the bulky waste pickup. And we had agreed to, it started out as a $22 an item charge. They never followed through on that, and we continued to do it as we always had been with the $10 stickers. So they will be taking that over per the contract coming January 1. And there will be a bit of a sticker shock, excuse the pun, for the cost of those stickers. So they will be going up to what had been incrementally gone up all along, now to $27. So that's a change. It's door-to-door service. It's relatively speaking, a good way to handle something that you can't handle otherwise. So it's not an exorbitant fee considering the service, but it's a big change from what people are used to. So there will be a flyer going out that announces the year-long calendar, reminds people about how to recycle. There are some changes in recycling. So one of the biggest challenges with recycling right now is contamination. And so they are really being sticklers about that. And what will happen, not in our contract right now, but in the next contract that we sign, we will pay a premium every time there's a contaminated load of recyclable materials. So it behooves us to try to educate and get people well-trained as to the how-tos of good recycling habits.
Well, it behooves each of us and everybody.
Right. So the mailer that'll go out to all households will explain both the bulky waste process of contacting waste management and paying them direct. Takes us out of the middle, which actually is helpful and streamlines our effort. And also explaining the pickup days and days, holidays that gets pushed back, and also the recycling details. So DPW will also be putting out information. We'll be putting it out in your updates during the course of the next few weeks leading up to the January changeover.
Who would be the arbiter of the criteria for a contaminated load of recyclables?
Well, so they do inspections at their processing plant. If we want to challenge that, I don't have a good answer to you right now how we would do that, besides inspect them ourselves as well. If they pull something off and set it to the side, perhaps. So that's an area we'll have to explore in more detail.
Get your new pair of boots.
Yeah,
Right.
the definition of trash police.
Right.
What are we doing beyond the pamphlet to make people aware of the price increase? That's a 100%, more than 100% jump in
Right.
price.
Right. So again, we'll put it on the website. We'll have a couple of articles in the paper. There'll be
And
a
then
flyer
that mail
mailing.
from that direct mail.
But I think in terms of disposal, it's a general indication of where everything is going in terms of costs of throwing away our stuff.
Yeah, it's one of those items that have stayed the same forever. Really, it should have had incremental increases along the way.
Okay.
So lastly, had a nice pizza lunch that Brian and Nancy spearheaded, which was great. And then we also have we'll be having a holiday gathering on the 20th. And all of you are certainly encouraged to come if your schedule allows. And with that, we're almost exactly on 7:30 schedule.
Is that pricing, what's the next schedule on that pricing of that pickup?
For the bulky waste,
It's
it's an annual, so it's every
Right.
January.
So what's the next,
So it's
what's the 2020 jump?
I think it's 2.5%.
It jumped 100% and then it jumps 2%?
Right, the contract called for starting at 22 and going up 2 or 3% a year.
We were at 10, the contract started at 22, so, we went from 10 to 22.
We took that big jump
And
with the
now we're at
contract.
20, okay. Because I just went to the Waste Management Bagster site, and you can get a bag the size of a small vehicle for $140 from Waste Management. So at what, it'd be interesting to know where they're going with their pricing, because
Oh, I see what you're saying.
they
Yes.
clearly don't want to do it.
Right.
Okay.
I just think we should not be in the middle of the town wondering where we're going with this. Because this isn't the town messing up the residents, this is a supplier that doesn't want to do it.
Right, in an industry that is going through lots of changes.
When are your contracts
2 more years, I believe. It's a 5-year contract. I think we're finishing up on 3 and entering in 4 and 5.
So I guess to put it out there, I'm not saying we do this, but if you need, maybe you're already doing this, is to prepare for the day where we just don't do large item pickup, period.
Right.
Because to do it, it's gonna cost a ton, the town's gonna be viewed in not the best light by
Right,
residents.
as the bad person, right.
The reality of the economics is that no supplier is gonna wanna do this. Getting back to the services that we're gonna do and not do.
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, with that, I would like to just pause for
Oh,
about.
I'm sorry.
Oh, do you have
I'm
something?
sorry, just one additional item that came up. Annually, you proclaim Robert F. Sanford Day. And so the day desired is December 16th, the day before your next meeting.
Oh, okay.
So if you are not adverse, it would be wonderful if you could agree to this proclamation.
Want a motion?
I will take a motion.
I'll take a motion to accept the Robert F. Sanford proclamation.
For December 16th.
Oh, I'm sorry, for December 16th.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We need to sign. Okay, good. So, are you done in one?
Yes.
meeting?
Okay.
Let's take a 2-minute just pause and have the FinCom come up and join us, and we'll go through our budget presentation.
Ready?
Okay. Okay, good. All right, Greg, all yours.
All right, thank you. So this is a significant milestone in terms of the process of the annual budget development. Before you, it will be, is the preliminary budget for the year. A lot of work has already gone into the development of the budget, so it starts with Finance Committee and Selectmen setting some initial goals and parameters for the budget, working with the department heads then and pulling together initial requests, sitting down with FinCom liaison and the department heads and myself to fine-tune those requests to put it into a preliminary budget. So that is what has been happening for the last couple months, leading up until this day, where you have this preliminary budget before you. So thank you to all the department heads for their work and the liaisons. Andrea Mainville, our town accountant, even though she's on maternity leave, has put in a lot of hours on this as well, which I very much appreciate. And Sonia certainly worked very hard, especially today, assembling all the pages as we get ready for tonight. So it's a fairly thick document. There's a lot of information in it. I'm not going to go through page by page of all 200 and some odd pages here, but I will highlight various things as we go through the evening here. So just in terms of what's in it, the format is similar to what you have seen. You see a transmittal memo from me in the beginning. At the end of that transmittal memo, something new this year, when we had talked about wanting to see what it would mean to have a 1.5% increase instead of what is typically 2.5 per department heads. So you see a spreadsheet at the end of my memo outlining those reductions, in essence, from departments that came in over 1.5. A number of departments were already at 1.5 or a little less. So if you see a 0, that's why. But I will get into that a little later in the presentation. Then Section A is summary highlights, gives an overview of total expenditures and revenues, breaks it down a bit, different graphs and percentages, and provides that cursory summary overview. And then following that, you see the individual areas of function. So general government, which has Selectmen and my office, the town clerk, the town treasurer, the various planning, land use boards, and then you have public safety, so fire, police, and the harbor master, as well as building inspections, which actually falls into two places because we also have it under the assessor's office these days. You have public works, you have, et cetera. I don't need to read all the tabs. You'll see the various departmental tabs, or the general categories in the book. And then at the end, at the back, you will see capital. So again, we have the 5-year rolling. You'll see an emphasis on the request for this coming year. There will be some supplemental information coming out, a little more detail on some of those requests. We'll give that out to you soon, as well as some appendices. And two of the appendices are not filled out completely. One is looking at individual staff salary and benefit costs by individuals. That still needs to be developed. And then updating the five-year plus operating budget forecast. That's also not in this book as you sit here tonight, but we will be getting those to you, soon. So I just wanted to run through a number of key points and highlight what I see as sort of the essential issues for us to debate as we fine-tune this document over the next 2 months. Our goal is to, 3 months, our goal is to have this in its final form by the end of February, so that then we send it off to the printers and get it ready for April town meeting, first Monday in April. It all seems to roll around fairly quickly. So, I'd like to start off just with the big picture. So the proposed budget clocks in at $34.6 million. And in broad brush strokes, you've got $16 million going to the school district. That's both for operating and the debt does not include any new debt service for the elementary school. There may be a small number that we have to add for that, but it'll be small if anything. It may well wait until FY21. General town operations, just over 11 million. Capital expenditures are up fairly significantly. We're aiming for that $3 million target, which we want to level up at $3 million. And again, I'll go into a little more detail on that. Debt payments and capital exclusions combined, again, our target is 1.9 million max, so we're just under that. Enterprise funds, water and sewer, supported by the fees that they charge. Community preservation for now is simply a placeholder. We kept it level from last year, so it just doesn't throw off percentages and whatnot. They have a preliminary set of projects that are a little higher than that, but that's still to be worked through. And then we have various state assessments, our OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. So it's basically retiree health insurance or liabilities. We set aside trust fund. We allocate $100,000 in snow and ice, and we also continuing to put money into stabilization. It continues to grow. So, not expecting you to read all of this while you sit here, but I do like to remind you of all the services that the town does provide. This is only a sample of that, but it's an impressive sample in terms of the services that you're getting for those dollars. Obviously, this is town side, this is not school. So, for example, 300 million gallons of water are processed every year, both on the drinking side and on the sewer cleaning side. When you add up all the storms and all of our roads, 3,200 lane miles of plowing and de-icing. On the trash side, you got 1,000 tons of trash that are collected, and 70 tons of recyclables are collected. Got about 120 tons of compost being collected. I'd love to get that 120 number up because it can save us on our disposal costs. So the various bills that are processed, so 4 tax bills, quarterly tax bills. It's close to 9,100 tax bills go out. We've got 5,000 cars in town that we send bills from. We also have boats that we send out to and utility bills. 3,800 beach stickers, 900 dog licenses, et cetera. I don't need to repeat all of these, but I did want to just highlight for you a range of services, obviously, that we provide with all the different departments. So it adds up to a lot. There's a lot of activity going on, and hopefully, if we're doing our jobs well, taxpayers feel that they're getting good value for the money that they're spending. So some of the key assumptions and some of the main goals that we have for this budget. So we're assuming that the citizens want the services that they're currently getting. So the main budget does not recommend reductions in services. We assume that taxpayers are okay, if not thrilled, but okay with an annual tax increase of 2.5%. That we continue with this relatively new policy of level funding our total exclusions, so that as our debt exclusion decreases, we are increasing our capital exclusion. So again, that $1.9 million threshold we aim for. So as we drop debt, we add to our exclusion, and you'll see that in this budget. And as I said, capital funding is up. It continues a pretty aggressive effort to make up for a large backlog of infrastructure needs. And this budget certainly continues to do that. We continue to work on ways for enhancing education, for voter education and involvement, trying to get the word out to people. As Becky indicated earlier in the meeting, trying to be as transparent as we can. It's one of those areas where you can never do quite enough. There's always more to be done. We've talked about the master plan recommendations now being front and center and wanting to advance those. And for staffing needs, so the vast majority of staffing remains the same. There are 4 areas that are proposed for enhancing some staffing. One is in the harbor department, harbor master area, for additional weekend coverage on busy summer weekends. Part-time specialists in human resources, some enhanced office management for the selectmen in my office, and there's also a small boost in hours for the staff in the Conservation Commission office. Finally, remaining goal, working collaboratively with neighboring towns, again, with shared services or regionalization of services. And all the while, we want to maintain what really remains a very strong fiscal condition for the town. We enjoy a AAA rating. We have reserves that are really above our targets, and we'll talk a bit about that a little later this evening. As we go forward, we want to make sure we're not losing that good standing that we do have. So just a little bit more on the fiscal challenges. This has been repeated often, just trying to right-size our public safety operation. So we have a vacancy in the fire chief position, so that presents another opportunity to make sure before we move ahead with that we look at potential options for that as we move forward. And it may involve the other public safety operations, either in-house or neighboring communities. So that's an area that remains a challenge for us and will be the focus of some real effort. So our capital needs are much better shape than they have been. We've made excellent progress in the last 5 years. I think the $3 million target for an annual spend is an aggressive amount and puts us on a good trajectory. I'm coming to the caveat, and that caveat is really the wild card that was alluded to earlier, that Arthur mentioned, is the impacts of climate change and how do we position ourselves to be resilient for the impacts that are coming, that we've actually seen in small bits and pieces already. In terms of fortifying this building, for example. Water was lapping at the doors last March during those high tides and storm surges. So there's some fortifying that we need to do. There may be some retreating that we need to do in certain areas of town. So it's a big area that can take up a lot of dollars going forward. And as I get to later, we may want to think about putting some of our large fund balance and/or redirecting some of our capacity in local receipts into a capital stabilization fund specifically targeted towards climate resiliency efforts. We'll talk more about that a bit later. The cost for benefits for employees continues to be a concern, though over the last 4 years or so, we've actually done quite well on the town side. For our health insurance, we've averaged just over 2% annual increases, which is a significant improvement over what had been double-digit annual increases. We beat the odds these last few years. We'll see if we can keep that going. I like to think that some of our wellness programming is helping along these lines. But the long-term trends still are very troublesome. Our health insurance plan for a family costs about $27,000 annually. And though we're paying a smaller percentage of that, that's still a very large number. It won't be long before that number is $30,000. That's just a scary number. And it has a big impact on budgets. Even if we can keep the annual increases low, it's still a lot of money going out the door. It's a tough problem to solve locally. It's really a national problem, but it does impact us. And finally, the school district challenges in terms of living within a number that is high relative to what we do for the town for increases, but still is short in terms of them being able to level fund or provide level services. So the budget that is in your hand this evening assumed a 3.25% increase, which is our target. Last year they were at 3.6. And so we will have to see how this comes together by March. But obviously, it's the largest single part of our budget. It's about 47% of total expenditures. And it's a few tenths of a percent up or down makes a big difference when you're talking about those large numbers. So it has a big impact. So I always like to show you what new dollars we have to work with when we go through the budget process. So again, assuming that 2.5% increase is okay with voters, then that brings in an additional $615,000. We're assuming new growth will continue, though at a slower pace. This number has been actually over 300,000 a few years ago. It came in at 275 this current year, and this is assuming a more conservative number at 200. Obviously, this is very dependent on the economy and what happens with the economy. There are some signs of a downturn that are making its way through the system, so we may want to be a little more conservative with this new growth number as we go forward. For now, I am showing local receipts as being flat, and we'll talk about that a little bit further on what we might be able to do with that. We are extra conservative on our local receipts. What we have done traditionally is roll that forward into fund balance and then take that out the following year for capital projects primarily. We also fund OPEB through that and the snow and ice deficit anticipation. So, all told, about $880,000 of new money that we have to put towards next year's operations. So where would that 880 go? So this assumes, well, I'll just walk you through. So currently we're at 33.7. So when you look at the school portion and the town portion, Schools at just over 46%, we're just over 53%. So an 880 is a 2.6% increase on total spend. And I'm showing 416,000 of that going to the town side for a 2.3% increase. And I'm showing 464,000 going to the school district, which is a 3.25% increase for them. So that's how the 880 gets divided into the two major camps.
Where do you see available funds ending up for 2019?
I'm sorry,
Where do you see available funds ending up for 2019?
total available in terms of fund balance?
How often budgeted? It's budgeted at 1.365. I'm just wondering that 880, when I look back 2 years, our available funds have actually been declining. So we're saying we have new funds, but maybe we need to offset past declines, which would create a net of like $500,000, not 880. Depending on where 2019 available funds end up.
Well, so,
I don't have to really, we can come back to it, so I just,
well, the 880 is new taxation primarily.
right.
He's on A1.
Um,
I'm not disagreeing with that number, I'm just saying that you suggest that it's like incremental, and I'm just flagging, we can come back to it, I don't want to auger into it right now, but
Oh, I see what you're saying.
our available funds have been in decline, so we just need to take a little of that in our mental math and go back and fill some available funds that have been declining.
Right, so primarily, we have been using a little less of fund balance.
Okay. So you think we're going to come in as projected at 1.4, 1.365, or
Yes, we'll be over that.
we'll be over that? Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, because that's
Do you
conservative.
think we'll be back up to like 1.6, or?
Or even more than that.
Oh, okay, so then the 880 would, okay, there we go, that's the answer to the question.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so just a little deeper dive on the town side in terms of what expenses. We have a large decrease in the debt. You'll see that red number, the 340. So it's a little bit deceiving, so that actually ends up in a decreased expenditure when you look at just general operations. Obviously, an increase in salaries, that 260 number assumes that you approve the increases in staffing that I just briefly mentioned earlier. Our health insurance, again, we've been fortunate in that we can lower that number, even though we will see a 2 to 4% increase in the premium rate. There is money in that budget to allow it to actually come down. Mainly staff, new staff pick up a higher rate. They're paying 35% of the premium rather than well, it used to be 25, but now it's 30 for most. And we've also had more people opt out. So as our plans become, as people pay a higher percentage, they talk to their spouse and say, oh, wait a minute, what can you get from your job? And so we're not always the first choice, which is not a bad thing. It's good for our bottom line.
Do you have an idea of what general percentage town employees are using our health care?
Oh.
Of 100% of town employees, what percent?
I don't know the number offhand. It's probably 85 to 90%. I mean, it's still very high, but it is coming down.
And do we have any mechanism to audit whether or not spouses are getting healthcare services from other employers?
Yes, yes. So our provider does that. So Maya, we purchase our health insurance through Maya. They do audits, and they send out through Blue Cross Blue Shield. They'll send letters to people to say to report any other.
Is there any more than letters, or is there actual effects on plans? Just trying to avoid the town being exposed to paying twice.
Right, right. Yeah. So I can get you more details on that. I can't.
That's one of my questions for the school district, because it was asked last year,
Yeah.
and one of the things I think Avi was going to look at.
Mhm.
But I'm just wondering, is the town, are we inadvertently paying more than we should. I'm not saying we are, I don't
Right,
know. But
right, we
this is-
try
This is
to-
an area that I know that the private sector has clamped way down on.
Yes, yes, yeah. And so, like I say, Maya and Blue Cross Blue Shield working in conjunction do a lot of auditing.
Okay.
I can't recite
Yeah,
it
that's fine,
chapter and
that's fine.
verse, but
Yeah.
I do know they do that. We can get more details.
Fred, I thought that the reduction in debt was going from the capital side.
It is.
So aren't you really understating here? the
Well, so you'll,
cost?
you'll see it next page. So that is short-lived because our debt, our capital is going up significantly. So not only are we redirecting funds, but we're adding additional funds here.
But if you go to the prior page,
Yep.
it's not down by 38,000, it's up by,
So just this
up
area,
by 302,000, to be clear,
when I add the capital in, absolutely.
because you don't have the capital there.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. So capital is just separate because it is such a high variable year to year. But, and it's been growing. But absolutely,
Your
that's,
expenses are here too on the operating side.
your expenses are up,
302,000.
well, they're up more than that. Yeah. They're up, in total, they're up about 416,000. So it's about a 2.3% increase. So, yeah, no, I don't want to leave the impression at all that we're spending less, because we're not, we're spending more. But I wanted to make the point that, well, it's really because of the debt
Right,
that's
and
driving
if
it.
you're allocating that to capital, which doesn't want capital, it's not in the operating budget. Just use a false impression.
Yeah, it's just going from one to the other. So, as I say, the capital side is seeing increase. The drive is to get to that $3 million figure. We will, in a few years, be able to do a capital exclusion for $1 million, but we're not there yet. And so to get there, to get to that $1 million figure, in addition to the other monies, this taps into the strong fund balance that we have, so it's adding an additional $350 from the fund balance. Enterprise fund is redirecting, adding a few dollars, but mostly redirecting. The sewer debt, for example, is dropping, so that they're able to add more money to capital. We do show general fund taxes being increased to pay for capital. And then for this year, we can increase the capital exclusion by about $150,000.
Why, if we're decreasing the debt by 340 and only increasing the capital exclusion by 150?
Because the debt, part of that debt is non-excluded debt, that dropped. So we only increased the excluded portion and not the non-excluded
So we're
portion.
using,
But we use the 125 from taxes from the debt that dropped from non-excluded.
and it just,
Right.
I'm a little confused that if we're saying we're not gonna incur more debt, why the total amount of the decreasing of debt is not reflected on this page?
Say that again, why?
If we say we're not gonna be using decreases in debt to fund the operating budget, and we're saying we're not increasing more debt, why aren't I seeing that 340,000 decrease in debt on this page? Or did I misunderstand something?
No, I see your question. So I'll have to double check.
Okay.
I'll double check. Okay. So just to spend a little bit more time on the game plan on funding the capital. Again, the goal is to get to this $3 million annual on a cash basis. So we get there by replacing retired debt with capital exclusions. And to get to the $1 million mark, we'll be there in three years. In the meantime, we would use higher amount of fund balance to get there. So that becomes a steady state, we anticipate, for the next 15 or so years. So at 3 million, that's $45 million in new capital expenditures, which, again, will go a long way towards making up that backlog that we have had. And then by the early 30s, we will have the remainder of the town debt retired, and we will have our retiree liabilities fully funded. So those two items combined free up a substantial amount of dollars. You're talking over, you're talking close to $3 million that would be available that you could do a new set of bonding if there are large projects at that time that need to be addressed. So the $3 million doesn't have to be spent every year. You may have a project that costs $3 million. You wouldn't want to just spend all the $3 million on one item 1 year. But you may say, okay, let's spend $2 million, and in 3 years' time, we'll have $3 million in a capital stabilization account that would allow us to do a $3 million project during this 15-year period where we're trying to not incur new debt. And then the last piece concerning the Essex Elementary, and it's been talked about, but that we wait until the middle high school debt is retired before taking on the full load of a new bond for whatever's going to happen at Essex Elementary. And again, that happens in the early 30s.
So we've had this discussion several times over the past year. I like this strategy, but what is causing you to trigger the execution of this strategy right now, when the prospect is interest rates are going up? So why would we, I'm just curious, why would we shift to such a cash-heavy strategy now and not wait until rates are at a point where we wouldn't want to engage in them? I like the strategy, I'm questioning the timing of triggering this, because this is a very smart safe haven strategy, but the rates are still so low and it seems premature.
So we could have that discussion to delay this a year or two. Timing that market is going to be hard.
I'm just concerned that the rate of appreciation on the cash that we're going to be sitting on is not going to offset the benefit of borrowing at a reduced rate now.
Right.
So, the town is going to think it's saving wisely, and in reality, time value of money, we're actually going to be losing money.
Right, so the crystal ball is the challenge there in terms of the
And I'm not saying
timing.
I have the answer, I'm just.
Right, no, I know.
It's an issue of timing, right? Because this is the right move, this is like a timing move.
Right. So collectively, we should discuss what makes the most sense for timing. I agree with you 100%, but that's, you don't want to pull the trigger too soon.
Well, the compliment, I'm really happy to
No, I
see this.
understand, I understand.
Because this is actually smart management. I just want to make sure for the town's sake that.
Right, that it's being done at the right
it's
time.
being timed, the shift is being timed correctly,
Right.
because I don't think we're gonna see rates like we're seeing them now. They are going up, they're going up as we speak.
So one thought on that, though, is that the time constant that the town operates on is really long
Yeah.
relative to all of us as potential individual investors. This budget's not gonna kick into gear until July 1 of 2019. It's gonna run to 2020. So, we're sort of really looking out 18 months right here. I think the second thing is concerned about how long it wants to sit like that.
Well, I'm not saying I'm right or I have the
Yeah,
answer.
it's a good one.
I have to share your thoughts on this. And one way I was thinking about it was to have the school getting into the debt market sooner rather than later. Use the established cash for a while. Trade-off for a lower rate is going to be negative. Maybe they'll consider that would help balance off the town strategy. So take a debt position earlier and use the cash position for the town.
So, yeah, absolutely, we should bang this around the table and decide if this is the right time, and as Mark says, maybe it's in conjunction with the strategy with the school.
Yeah, I don't want to load the town up on debt, I mean, that's not what I'm interested in doing, but I also just don't want to move to a cash strategy when the rate of that cash growing is not going to be great.
Yep. That makes sense. So, as I say, most departments are sort of status quo operations, both from an expense side and certainly from the staffing side. However, there are 4 exceptions to that. One is the summer weekend water patrol adds about $10,000 to cover that. There's some small boosts in hours. By small, I mean the clerk, an hour and a half a week, a grant writer, 2 hours a week, and the Concom agent, 2 hours a week. So we can get into the details of that, but the short version is that basically they're putting in unpaid hours to get their work done. So it's in recognition of that and giving them a small boost in hours so that they can get things that they need to get done and what we're paying them to do.
Is that water patrol just staffing, or is that equipment as well? I mean, you can hire more people, do we have enough staff?
So we would stick with the 2 boats, and we would put 2 in 1, so that you would have much more efficient ability to patrol and intervene.
I thought the issue was area coverage, not just 2 people in 1 boat still doesn't cover you.
Well, so it dedicates,
One swims.
One way storm.
so that having 2 in 1 boat, they're much more efficient in terms of their stops and how many stops they can make. And I can have Mike and Ed come in to explain their strategy.
Yeah, no, I've had discussions about it. My concern is that the area that we're responsible for is big, and for the size of this town.
We may try to shrink that in the roster, that's a discussion that's underway.
Okay. Bion knows best, right? If Bion doesn't think we need another boat, then let's not buy more equipment, but.
Yep, no, good questions asked. Good question. Third item is a human resource specialist. It's an area that gets sort of short shrift. So there's a few of us who do it very part-time. So this is bringing in a specialist to help on a part-time basis, or we contract out. So these last 2 items are something that we may want to consider as contract services rather than town staff. There are pros and cons both ways. So those are the major staffing changes proposed. The boost in Concom, it's about $7,500. The HR specialist is the most expensive one, that's about $32,000. Part-time clerk is about $22,000.
Were you gonna try this, where you do some HR and part-time clerk? Would it just make sense to try it on a third party, you have got a new employee, to see how it goes. And if it doesn't for a while, or if it goes great, it is like the person, then you better.
Right, so we,
To do it the other way around, you kind of an employee,
right.
Concom, a very big thing with the finance.
Yep.
People basically think
Right, so that 10,000 in harbor patrol can be covered by the waterway funds. And yes, we could collect more with the permitting fees to offset that higher cost.
But if we're covering that water patrol with water fees and not increasing them, aren't we in effect diverting that money to some other purpose? And don't you really need to
So-
increase your waterway fees in order to cover that cost? To be neutral?
Yeah, I have no objection to increasing the waterway fees. There's, I think there's some elasticity with it. We've talked about that at your meetings as well. So just a few other highlighted changes. There are a number of reductions. We talked about the health insurance.
What about IT? Are we doing any new spend on IT?
Not new spend, but we may spend what we currently spend differently. So right now, it's basically contract service. We may be able to partner with some neighboring towns on that. So we're exploring those options. So not more money, but it may be spent differently. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, wrong answer. Yes, I need more money. I forgot to add it in.
We were awake still.
So I think I've highlighted most of this. Salary increase, obviously, is the biggest item, and then the capital as well. Capital is actually the biggest one. Salary is the next biggest one. So just to give you a sense of what this means, where we are, so the median value of a home has jumped a bit. It's up to 1.145. So that property tax this year at 11.23 per thousand is a little under 13,000 for the year. So a 2.5% increase represents a $321 increase. And then similarly on your median home, just over 750,000, paying 8,400 in taxes, would look at a little over $200 in new taxes under this proposed budget. So some comparative data there. Oh, there's a typo. That should be a 410, not 310, in terms of the statewide average. So what about limiting the increase to 1.5% in terms of each department's growth? So it would shave about $145,000, not counting the enterprise funds. You'd shave another $24,000 or so if you wanted to keep the enterprise at 1.5 as well. So it's basically half a point on the tax increase. So instead of a 2.5% increase, you could come in at a 2. It does eliminate all that proposed new staffing that I just walked through. Not surprisingly, your biggest impacts are on your 3 big departments, your police, fire, and DPW. And it would cause some reduction in services in these. The department heads and I have identified some areas of reduction that would happen. We could debate, whether we would take that. For example, police is recommending eliminated parking patrol. That actually is a moneymaker for us, so it's not the best one to eliminate from a total dollars perspective. Plus the desire from the public to not have illegal parking.
So Greg, if you go back to the previous page and you implement this $145,000 savings, what's the tax increase?
So it'd be a 2% rather than 2.5.
Right.
So-
The actual tax that you pay.
Oops.
Okay, so you see the year tax increase, $321.
Right, so you take a fifth off of that.
You say $60.
Yep. Oops. So again, at the end of my transmittal memo, you will see a spreadsheet that walks through the dollar amounts by department and highlights potential reductions, what those reductions would be. And I try to give a sense of, is that major or minor or sort of middle of the road in terms of impact. And some are negligible, certainly for your smaller departments. Cutting $1,000 is not going to be a big impact.
So it seems like you could implement something.
You can. Right, you could. So that's why I give you that list, and we can walk through those and decide, which ones we feel are ones we can live with and others that you feel are important not to do. So it gives you a more focused ability to fine-tune some of these budgets. It is.
Okay.
Yep, that's that 100,000 snow and ice. So yes, that is in there. We didn't use it this year,
At all?
not at all. So yes, snow and ice last year was handled within the existing budget.
Are there any items that have been left out of the budget? For example,
So this assumes a lower cost approach to the clickers. It's only budgeting $6,000 for the clickers. So that does assume that one way or the other, Christina and Alan and us will come up with a lower cost approach. Okay, she has some ideas, and she'll be happy to present those. So what's not, so certainly, a big push was, keep your expenses level. So that's pinching departments, no question. So I would point to some general expenses for most departments, or they could benefit from a little more leeway. They've been asked, and they have done it. They have survived on basically level funding those expense accounts for the last 4 years. So that's catching up. People are feeling a bit of the pain of that as we go forward. So some of the key topics that I think we need to focus on. We just talked a little bit about these two new areas of support, whether or not they be in-house or contracted out. Just need to nail that down. Haven't mentioned this, but another area is to take a hard look at Parks and Rec, and we've sort of kicked it around for a few years. We haven't really gone into the nitty-gritty details. So could it be a true enterprise operation? It may be a phase-in of that. They're short probably about 75,000 from being 100% self-sufficient. So it's not an impossible number to reach.
Does that cover beach operations?
Yeah.
So wouldn't that inhibit our ability to gain additional revenue as the town, in the town general fund for like increase in new beach fees, et cetera? Seems to me then it would all go to Parks and Rec.
It would.
The town wouldn't benefit from that.
Right, so
One of our big assets.
so you have to weigh the trade-off. So if they were 100% sufficient, you would free up about 75,000 in current tax funds that are going to basically subsidize Park and Rec.
But it doesn't have to be in an enterprise fund,
True,
in the budget, right?
correct.
75 grand.
Right, there's a, right, no, you can. You can. You don't have to go through that formality, but you can treat it,
As a strategy.
yeah, as a strategy.
Yeah, similar to the notion of challenging the departments to propose a budget that's 1.5% instead of 2.5%. Challenge Parks and Rec to be self-sufficient.
Right, yes, very simple. Yes,
What's the sort of variability you see, we should remember this from year to year on Parks and Rec? I mean, revenue is somewhat dependent on weather, expenses are somewhat dependent on choices made annually, but in net, you sort of do this, so some years are good years and some years are bad years. What the bandwidth is on that?
not offhand, I'd have to have Cheryl give me some historical numbers to look at that. The beach revenue, I know, can fluctuate by 30,000. That's not an unusual swing in beach revenue. That's probably her biggest variable. The other's probably a little more consistent. They're pretty consistent.
But to Muffin's point earlier, that's about to get a little disruptive with construction for the next couple of years, so.
Yeah, it's true.
we have to think about what the impact is on
Take away
fields.
spaces, then there's fewer programs.
The strategy we try to make it to be self-sufficient, but outside of the inefficiency of investment. So if you made it to break even, then you can absorb the revenue from another place.
much are we exposed to on the repair of the seawall that's being used?
The current repair?
Yes,
I don't-
it's a pretty significant repair.
I don't think it's more than it was the last, I think it's less than what it was last
All our
time. Pardon?
It's all us, or is this?
No, we're pretty optimistic we'll get some FEMA money. Chuck and Nate are working on that, actually.
Is there any sense of panic about it? 'Cause the-
Not a good sense of timing, no. It's, we won't know for months. It's months away. So,
But would the work would not disrupt, now I'm getting back to the revenue question, the work, you don't anticipate the work disrupting the beach traffic this summer?
no, I mean, we can put it off to the fall. If it's not gonna make it before June,
The beach is coming back, so it's gonna be a better year.
right. Well, we'll see what happens this winter.
Yeah, I should have said that.
Yeah, you just did it.
Yeah, I should have said
Thanks,
that.
Arthur.
Yeah.
Next storm's on you.
But Arthur said.
It wasn't gonna happen.
So another area that I think deserves a lot of our attention is how to best manage our fund balance and the use of our local receipts. So do we establish a capital stabilization fund for future storm damage, for future seawall repairs and renovations, for resiliency projects that we know we're going to be facing? Do we put a chunk of money into our OPEB account and front load that and get some compounding interest earnings going to help us sort of,
Borrow money from that?
you can.
No.
One community did that. Wellesley did that.
No.
During line something, you borrow money.
Yeah, but you've got, how much money do you have just sitting in cash?
Well, but that's the point that I was picking up too, like, why are we doing that? We just forego it.
Like 2%.
Tell me what we're earning when that money's sitting in the fund.
Well, I'm, my point is, you can borrow money, what is it, I'm just focused on the OPEB, so maybe they're working bigger deal. If you borrow money and fund the OPEB, then the premiums returning 9-7%, the borrowings are 3. They're pretty spread.
I just don't think you can borrow when you're sitting on that much cash, isn't earning much money.
More like 7.2.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
What are we earning at? We're earning
And
at
that's
2%?
actually.
On our cash?
I think they're actually
Right.
right at 7.
One?
I don't have no clue.
Cash is right around 2.
2%? Yeah, so, we ain't going forward.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why putting some of that cash into a longer-term instrument like the OPEB, you know, you're in 7 rather than 2.
But we're still way ahead of schedule on getting ourselves to full funding on that, right? We're at 16 years as opposed to the 30 years that we were originally expecting. That was the update from last year, right? And the money that we might, if we continue to put more money into it, that's money that we would take away from things that, you know, we could potentially do around the town in the short term for residents. So I do feel like we're in relatively good position on the OPEB. I wonder why we would be focusing on accelerating that.
So, because ultimately, the amount that you have to put in the fund is going to be more now at a higher rate of return than you just do annually raising the cash. It's an investment. It's an investment that's sort of, you have to measure what $1,000 put in the OPEB and at
Yeah. Conversely, you have to measure against what capital projects you could not do. And, you know, you look at the capital projects and building costs year over year are increasing at actually around 7%, right? So you weigh that against the prim, which is, we're saying, what, 7.2? The differences are relatively negligible when you do the math that way, except now the money that you put into the OPEB side just vanishes from your ability to put in on the capital side, and you just have to push the capital side much further out. So things that contribute to the cultural advance of the town aren't done, so.
Yeah, but we haven't demonstrated our ability to do a couple of projects.
Well, that's part of what this larger exercise has been with the master planning and with, I think, just because we haven't demonstrated our ability to do it so far is not necessarily a good argument for us to immediately push it into something that we can't get back anytime soon.
So I think there's a lot of discussion to be held on our fund balance and our local receipts and how you best want to utilize those resources. Because I think some changes are needed. I don't think we should continue on the current path that we've been on, and I think some course corrections are needed there. And there's some options, and we should decide which options seem to be the best. So I flag that as one of the primary areas of discussion that we need. Been talking about shared service, regional services, and pursuing those more aggressively. And we talked a little bit about resiliency planning and what additional dollars that we may want to, again, put aside for those efforts when they come along. There will be grant opportunities, but most of those require local match. So you need substantial dollars even if you get the grants and various awards.
Question on resiliency planning, has there been any sort of consultant work or, very, very hard to pin this down, but any rough sense of what the town might be looking at to do that,
Dollar-wise,
dollar-wise?
you mean in terms of the repairs and fortifications, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably very hard to do an analysis on it, but what would be like the cost of a 30-year plan or a 20-year plan?
So we don't have good numbers on that. The state did an analysis a few years ago about what it would take just to repair to today's conditions, all the seawalls. It was about a $13 million price tag. You know, this concept of a barrier at the mouth of the harbor, you know, wild guess is around a $40 million project. Excuse me. If we had to relocate the sewer plant, you know, that's probably a $30 million project. I would sure look to turning that into a pump station and trying to make a deal with Beverly and pump it there before I put $30 million into a new plant. Excuse me. But it gives you a sense. But we don't have hard figures. We've identified a lot of, you know, we've identified vulnerabilities, but we haven't identified what it would cost to correct those vulnerabilities. So a little bit more on the fund balance and local receipts. Again, lots of options. And we should talk about what some of those might be and which ones you feel we should move forward with. So using it to transition to the full $1 million in capital exclusion, using it for new capital stabilization, put money away for these projects we know will be on the horizons. You could decrease your tax increases to people. You could use it to reduce the impact of the new school bond, where you basically sit on it because you think there's going to be an economic downturn pretty soon and our new growth is going to head south. So these and other options that are before us that we should talk about.
The new growth numbers that you have baked into this budget right now,
It assumes about 18 million worth of new growth, which is about 200,000 of new money.
200,000. So that's the number that's under new properties on A3 in the revenue summary?
Yes.
So that's the new growth.
What is the liquidity of the fund balance? Is it in, like, some sort of ladder of funds, or how does it work?
The fund balance is almost all liquid.
Is it sitting in a money market?
So that's you got it, you baked in a significantly lower number for new growth in this budget over previous years?
This is lower, yes. This assumes a lower growth number. So it's, again, it's a conservative estimate of revenues. It flatlines receipts, and it actually drops receipts a little bit.
Yeah.
Don't we have a pretty good idea by the time we get to December
We have a decent idea. It's not nailed down, but we have a decent idea. It somewhat depends on, yes, the permitting has happened, but some projects, even if they get permitted, don't go through. So there's always a bit of a guessing game there, but.
But did you do any studies on it or anything?
You mean just in terms of past, historical?
Well, it seems to me like we have all the information in town hall. We know when permits are pulled.
Right.
Inspections are supposed to be done. We should know pretty much what the value is of stuff available for the next fiscal.
Yeah, the bulk of that work, well, we can have her speed it up, because she does have the data. She usually doesn't get to it until March, but it's something we could speed up.
Just would be good to know.
That'd be interesting.
Yep.
Great. And I'm sort of tracking off of Arthur's question about investment vehicles for stabilization and reserve. We went through and put together an investment policy about 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did it really tracking off of sort of peer communities, and
Mhm.
it seemed pretty safe, middle of the road. Is there any reason we should be talking about looking at that again? I think we're comfortable where we are, but I don't know if time's moved on. And we should revisit.
I think the first question is, are we following?
We are following it. It's very conservative, as state law really dictates. So it mimics state law. Are there areas where you can be a little more aggressive? Yes, there are.
I don't want to be critical of what we're doing, but if we've, I'm just looking at your reserve fund chart here, and if we've been, for at least the past 5 years, been sitting on $4 million or more of cash, and it's being 100% liquid, we're not helping ourselves.
Right.
I mean, we're getting into the finer details here, but
Right.
I'm not criticizing.
No, but I mean, that's what the policy says to do. So if we want to take a look at that policy and re-examine it, we certainly can.
I'm just going off what I've heard. Anyway, we're
For stabilization.
while we're figuring out our future, I think the point is, let's just make sure that we're not drifting backwards.
Yeah, ready to wrap it up. So I always like to say budgets are about choices. So I itemize 4 right things to do, right sizing. Are we appropriately sized for the services we're delivering? Are we delivering the right services in the first place? Do we have the right design for those service deliveries? In terms of, can we look at other models, whether it be through shared services or through better use of technology, et cetera? I think people have ideas and can be creative. I think the brain power we have sitting around the room could really help with those areas. And do we have the right funding sources? So there's been some interest, I think, through the master planning process about beefing up our commercial base, certainly in the LCD. There's been a lot of talk about fees and increasing those fees and better use of our reserves. So those are the 4 rights that I end with as we undergo the next 3 months of fine-tuning this budget. Look forward to your good input and your good questions and what information you need to help make those good recommendations. Let us know. We've got a good team of staff who can help, and we'll bring them in when you have specific questions in their areas. So, thank you for your attention, and thank you for your time and working over this over the next few months as we prepare for another town meeting.
No.
Captured it well.
Yes, thank you, Ben.
I would say on three slides for this, if you just go back, I would split, go back one more. Where's your strategies? Is it one more back?
Where's the what?
You had like five,
Oh, on the,
five.
oh,
like-
on the, I thought it was this one.
There was was this the one that, there was one that mixed capital with operating strategies. What my recommendation was just to, within the slide, separate what was capital questions from what was operating.
What was operating, okay.
Because they were all kind of blended together.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're all good, it's just. it might-
Bifurcate it.
Yeah, it just might help solidify the question. Okay, maybe it's next, is this one? I can't remember which one it was.
Curiosity question.
I'll find it.
Are we really receiving no short-term paying guest fees?
Oh, we didn't this year. No one renewed. Now, I can't guarantee you there's some out there. And we, you know, that's a tough process. So we go online and we see and we send them a letter and they say, oh no, we're under the limits and blah, blah. So everyone says, well, I'm doing it for more than 6 nights. That's how they get around our bylaw. Right.
Okay. Any other comments for anyone?
That's good work.
Yeah, so I would just say from a perspective of a high-level piece, I think all the details will work its way out. But I'm very, very interested in a couple things, and that is looking at, obviously, the reserve fund piece, understanding that. I think this question of timing on capital, cash, and debt and acquiring more is a really important piece for us to pay attention to. While it has little tea leaf stuff in it, but I still think we can get to some of those things. And I think overall, just being mindful, particularly with the master plan pieces coming into play in the next month or so, while it's not completely, it will be adopted in January by the planning board, I think really beginning to look at that in terms of what are some of the things that we can think about in terms of how we use that money, use the plan to help give us guidance on what's important, I guess is my point in terms of that. And then the final piece is the school. And I know that where, do we get our next collaboration meeting set yet?
We haven't said it, no.
So I think getting an early read on their budget and kind of where we're coming in at this point, sooner the better.
So they have their public hearing next week.
Yeah, I would love to get in there before that.
So, you guys have already had collaboration numbers. This, the 3.25 number, was that floated already to the school district? And
It's been talked about, at least as long as I've been scoping to it, that's the target that we were.
but
looking
usually
at.
ahead of the public, of the hearings, the actual public hearings, well ahead of that in the collaboration meetings, there's some direction given by both towns to the school district as to where we stand and what those numbers are going to be like. So
I think the 3.25
were
is
there
pretty clear.
specifically at those collaboration meetings discussion of this hard number that's going to come in, because my math says that's a significant downward change to them in their amount of money they're going to have to work with. It does not represent level services. Was it specifically discussed in the collaboration meetings leading into this budget cycle? Was it specifically discussed with them?
So it was scheduled today, we were going to have that conversation, but it got canceled.
But I think it's pretty clear. I mean, in every meeting I've been at, they know that our targets have been 3.25 for a long time. It's been in the last 3 or 4 rounds, so I don't think it would be a surprise for us to come in and saying this budget is based on looking at that, but that's our starting point, so I don't think it would be any big surprise at this point. Shouldn't be.
So to go to 3.25 up to a 3.6.
Yeah.
It's about a $40,000 addition.
For us.
So 3.6 or 3.5? I thought in there in the book it said 3.5. So it's 3.6?
I don't remember what I put in there. 3.6 is what they got this
But
year.
to answer your question,
I
Eli,
might have used 3.5.
we were supposed to have a collaboration meeting this morning. We decided to have this, and we're hopefully going to do it either Friday or Tuesday or whatever, really soon. So it'll be very, very clear. But I would say in sitting all those meetings, it's pretty clear the targets of what we've been looking at is 325.
325 for the now, which translates into 3637.
I think the one thing, Greg, that might be helpful, and I don't think it requires like a ton of work, but just from your perspective, from what you've been seeing, I think there should be a page about what just from your point of view, what lies ahead. Because all this is all just very specific to this year, which inherently that's the exercise, right? But, similar to the capital discussion, like there is an impact of us playing out over time, but we don't really have that view on the operating side. Like what from your point of view do the tea leaves look like or cause you concern? What are the top 3 to 5 flags in your mind on the operating side that the town is likely walking into beyond OPEB? Because we spend a lot of time as we should on capital, which is great. But there are also clearly some operating things on the horizon, and, we talked about the increasing cost of services for the town, and are there particular things that you think should be flagged on the operating side that maybe lie in the 3 to 5 years to come? And again, you don't need to have deep science into it. It could just be like, this is my belief.
Yeah,
That, I think the town should be aware, because as we make decisions about the budget on a very focused annual basis, it's good to not just think about capital in the future.
Right,
It's good to think about operating.
Yep.
And you have the experience to,
Yeah, no, I'll
clearly
tell you.
healthcare is like going to be one of the line items.
Healthcare is certainly part of that list.
But there's got to be some others, because I think there's a hypothesis that a lot of these services that we deliver, a lot of towns like Manchester, Essex, Hamilton, Wenham, whatever, of a certain size, over the next 5 to 10 years, some of these services are going to be very difficult for these towns to independently maintain. And so it would be good to have a little color.
Yep.
Might also feed a little bit of the regionalization discussion
Yep.
as to why we're even entertaining the concept. I think it's in the town's interest. It's not like there's some random exercise to go
Sure,
and
right.
do these things. I think there's legitimate concerns for the sake of the town.
Sure. Yep, I can put some time on that. I'll be very curious to see, we're out to bid for the operation of the water plant.
Yeah.
So we'll be getting those back at the end of the month.
But you've got, per what we talked about today, like just waste management.
Right.
Where does that go? Like,
Right. That's
it's not going down.
No, it's not. It sure isn't. That's a definite concern. Yeah.
So one thought is that I fully agree with that, because you know exactly what a lot of the services are, and it's sort of a forward-looking expansion of current services and what we're going to do in the future. The other parallel path is impact of the master plan method. And, that kicks into gear a little bit, but then it could then potentially kick into gear more and more and more. And what do those tracks look like? Because probably a year or two from now, the spending on that thought process is going to be more than it is.
Yeah, most of that, I think, can be handled within our capital. So you'll see in the proposed capital for next year, I think it's 50,000 for a complete rewrite of the zoning bylaws, which is sort of one of the higher priorities coming out of the master plan. So, the $50,000 to $100,000 range is probably what we're talking about for most of these implementation needs.
And in our capital, are we using the rewrite reference as a 7%? You indicate capital.
Construction costs, the historical numbers have increased year. Yeah.
Right, right, so it's
Construction
an inflationary cost, is that what we need in this budget for do our 5-year capital plan, something that costs $1,000 today, gets inflated 7% a year for the next 4 years?
So I don't know if we've used 7%. We do add inflation, but
Because if you did, you borrow the money and do it. Because 4 years ago, 30%, 35% more expensive, probably more than that when you compound it like that, someplace else.
yeah, it's just.
And the only thing that, in my mind, creates variable here is just what my friend Artie said, which is you have this divergence between what you can borrow at and what the growth of the expense is.
That's a couple with the growth of what you're sitting on. If we're growing at 2% and these costs are growing at 7%, it's a whole nother level of
Right.
So the building tree
Same
is
thing.
correct.
Mhm.
But you're already done at that point. Down, I built buildings, very big buildings. They maybe go down for a year when nobody wants you to build one anyway. But then it's, I just think the building asset is an interesting analysis.
Okay, good, thank you very much, great job.
Yeah.
Good, okay. Up and running. I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in
Second.
favor?
Aye. Did.
Okay, good.
Yeah, yes.